I love to read. I'm always reading something. One of my favorite ways to consume books is to listen to them in my car. I enjoy listening when I'm driving around, when I'm going from one house to another and doing my work. I like to have a book playing in the background. And I have a hard time seeing the pages without really good reading glasses and good light. So I prefer to read a Kindle that has a backlight and I can zoom up the letters, or to listen in my car. I love listening in my car because then I feel like the time that I'm spending driving around is not wasted. And today I wanted to talk about one of the books that I have purchased as a hard copy, and I've also listened to it twice in my car. It's a great book. This gentleman, Mark J Kohler, is a CPA and a tax attorney. He wrote the Tax and Legal Playbook, game-changing solutions for your small business questions. He has a YouTube channel that I highly recommend. He covers a lot of good topics for the small business owner. One of the reasons that I like his books, I have the Tax and Legal Playbook, and then I also have the Business Owner's Guide to Financial Freedom. That's a good one too, and believe it or not, they cover different things. Don't you hate it when you get a book from an author and you love it, and so you buy his next book and it just regurgitates all the same material? He doesn't do that, and I really appreciate that. I like that he had unique information in each book. In this book, in particular, this is the one that I've gotten through twice already. The reason I got a hard copy, even though I like to listen in the car, is because I like to have, on books like this, I like to have a reference. He talks at great length about the game plan that you should have on a small business. It doesn't matter if it's a small business like mine, where I'm a sole proprietor, or if you have an LLC, or if you have an S-Corp, and he goes over the different times when each of those works. You know, he talks about, and he doesn't talk about it in general terms, he talks about it in very specific dollar amount terms. Like when you're making this amount of money, you should be this type of business entity. When you have this type of business with this type of income, you should be that. And he goes into a lot of detail, which I appreciate, because a lot of them are very general. They don't want to hold themselves accountable. They don't want to give you financial advice because they're not a financial advisor. Like I'm not a financial advisor. I'm a small business owner who read a book, and I liked it enough that I wanted to share it. So this one, he does go into the different types of business entities that there are for small businesses, the most common mistakes that he sees in his practice. He does not appreciate LegalZoom and TurboTax and the DIY types of operations. The reason for that is because he fixes so many of them. Does he have a special interest in it as an attorney and CPA? Maybe. I mean, that's always a possibility. But after listening to his YouTube videos and reading his books, I think he does just want to help people. So he does go into great length about the different entities, when you need an LLC, when you need an S-Corp, when you need a trust, why you want to avoid the scams about going to Wyoming or Nevada or New Mexico, and he does call those scams. But it's a really good book. A few of the highlights that I appreciated, in addition to going over the business entities, is he spends quite a bit of time talking about not only which business entity you should set up, but why. He has a whole chapter on sole proprietorships, another chapter on limited liability companies, another chapter on S corporations. He does not like C corporations for the average small business, and he explains why. He spends a whole chapter on the 199A pass-through deduction strategies. I mean, he's got specific deduction strategies for different types of businesses, and he explains them in a way that you can understand it. You know, I'm not a tax attorney, I'm not a CPA, but I understood what he was saying. And I understood it well enough to tell my friends, hey, you've got a rental property, you probably need an LLC, and to explain why. And I think that's important because a lot of us, we're not attorneys, we're business people, we have a passion for what we're doing, and some of this other stuff gets complicated. As I said on a previous video, when I had a rental property, I set up an LLC, which was what I was supposed to do, you know, to prevent liability and to protect myself, but I didn't maintain it. And if you don't maintain it, it's almost worse than not having it, because not only do you not have the limited liability protection that you were shooting for, but you can rack up fines and fees pretty quickly too, because just because you don't maintain it or renew it or do whatever you're supposed to legally, it doesn't mean the state's not going to keep incurring those charges and penalties. They're not going to automatically dissolve it. And even if they do, that does, like I found in the case when I had an LLC in Arkansas, they'll invalidate your LLC if you don't renew it and you don't keep the correct minutes, do all of your like business minutes and all those things each year, but they won't stop charging you for it. So by the time I figured it out, I had 3 or 4 years worth of charges and late fees and fines all piled on top of each other because I wasn't renewing it. You would think that if you don't renew it, the fees stop, but no, they don't. So that's something you really need to watch with an LLC. Most people are aware of LLCs. They know that they need them for limited liability, but they don't realize that it's not a one and done type of deal. There is ongoing paperwork that you have to maintain. You have to have operating agreements. You have to keep minutes. You have to keep the books for them. And if you're not doing it, you need to hire somebody who will. Learn the hard way that that's a big mistake. He goes into great detail covering that. The other things that he covers, he talks about the different ways that the corporate veil can be pierced. Again, that's, if you have a limited liability and your goal is to protect yourself because maybe you have a risky business or you have something that has increased liability because of the nature of the work that you do. The last thing you want is someone to be able to sue you and take your house because one of your employees made a mistake at work. And that's what the limited liability is supposed to do. But if you don't set it up correctly, or you commingle funds, or you do some, he talks about different things. Like one of the things that he mentioned taking out loans and not being able to afford them out of your business budget. So if you, for example, I'm just going to pull some numbers out of the air to make the point. Let's say you got a $100,000 loan on your corporate business account, but you didn't make enough to make the payments back on the $100,000, but you had personal funds that you were going to pay for it, and you just didn't want the corporate loan on your personal credit. That's a problem. Because if you take out loans in the business name, but the business can't afford to pay the loan back, then they look at that as commingling funds, and I think they call it undercapitalization. And that's one of the ways that the corporate veil can be pierced. He goes through all of that. He gives examples, and he explains it in very easy to understand layman's terms. He loves to put, and there's charts and pictures in here as well. He also talks about underutilized business tax deductions. Who doesn't love a tax deduction? I like to listen to this every few months just to make sure that I'm not missing anything. He talks about how you could write off cars and miles and depreciate assets and phone and travel expenses. He talks about the hobby loss rule. That's an important one. If you have a side hustle and your side hustle is not profitable, but you're taking a whole bunch of deductions so that it looks like it's making a loss, you need to be careful because you can fall prey to the hobby loss rule, and then you don't get to take any of those deductions if you get audited. So he goes over all of those things. This is a great book for anybody who has a side hustle, a small business, or rental property. Because you're a small business owner even if you have rental property because you're a landlord. He talks about healthcare. He talks about hiring family members for tax savings. I love his chapter on family members. He has a whole chapter on rental properties, another chapter on basic bookkeeping, the IRS, tax saving strategies for selling properties. He talks about capital gains, installment sales, a 1031 like-kind exchange, which we may lose, but we haven't lost it yet, so we might as well still take advantage of all the tax deductions that are available to us until they're not. And then if things change and they're no longer available, then we adjust our strategies. He talks about charitable remainder trusts. It's not a very thick book, but there's a lot of good information in here. He talks about protecting your home from a lawsuit, asset protection in marriage and divorce, whole chapter on that. Documenting partnerships, bringing on investors. I especially enjoyed his chapter on retirement plan options. I currently have a Roth IRA and an SEP IRA, and I'm looking into setting up a solo 401k. And he also spends quite a bit of time talking about the self-directed retirement plans and the types, and I've never even really heard of that before. I would do more research before I took anybody's word for it out of a book. But I really like the idea of a self-directed retirement plan. I need to know more about it before I set one up. But he's got a whole chapter on that, and he talks about that. And then he also talks about trusts and estate planning. I have a trust set up, and I have estate planning set up. I did mine the same time my mom did hers. She didn't want to feel like she was setting up her trust because she was dying. And so she encouraged me to set mine up too, because there's no time like the present to set up your estate planning. And so I did. And I'm glad that I did, because now, once you set it up, it's a lot easier to maintain it. There's a lot of hesitancy with people doing their estate planning. I've done my estate planning since I had small children and I was in my 30s. It was something that I heard you should do. I've always been interested in those types of things. So I set up a will, and as you have different stages of life, your estate plan looks a little different. But I have found that once you get over the hump of doing it, facing it, I think is the hardest part, because you have to face your mortality. But once you get over that and you've done a few wills, you've done a few trusts, it becomes normal and it doesn't have a dark cloud of morbidity hanging over it. So you don't have to, you're not facing your demise every time you do it. After you've done a few of them, it's just paperwork that you know you need to do, like balancing your checkbook or looking at your budget. It becomes something that I routinely check. And so I would say, this is a great book. If you want to make sure that you're on track, if you want to make sure that you're doing the things that you need to do, pay as little as you can in taxes, and to maximize your retirement plans, knowing your numbers is very important. And I think this book will help anybody. Again, it's the Tax and Legal Playbook by Mark J Kohler, CPA and attorney. He's on YouTube. You can check him out. I really appreciated this book, and I appreciated him for all the information that is pretty complicated, but he made it seem normal and everyday and understandable. And I really appreciated that, and I hope that you will too. If you're like me and you would rather listen to it than read it, I'll also include a referral link for Audible. I hope you enjoy this. From time to time, I'm going to share other books with you that I think will help you get closer to your retirement goals and to save more money. I like business books and money-saving books. So if I come across a really good one, I'm going to share it with you. If you liked this, please like the video and subscribe so you can get more tips like this. And if you have any comments or other books that you think that I would really like, I would love to see what you're reading. So drop a comment down below, let me know what you're reading, and until next time, have a great day.